Overpaying for anything sucks, especially socks, so why pay $45 for a single pair of grip socks when you can spend less than half? Pure Grip Socks Pro feature our best materials for optimal fit, moisture wicking, and performance at a fair price, just $16.99 a pair at puregripsocks.com.
Before you buy the made in Japan Mizuno Morelia Neo 3 Beta, here are some things you should know. And if you do end up deciding that these are the right boots for you, you can pick them up below their normal retail price by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes by checking out the first link down below. So, first things first, the price. It needs to be addressed because these retail for $320, making them the most expensive football boots on the market by quite a significant margin. And while they're every bit as good in terms of performance and certainly in terms of quality, whether or not you can justify that much money for a single pair of football boots is very much a personal decision. In other words, they're great boots, but they certainly won't make you play better. This is not a pay-to-win situation. However, what you do get for that kind of money is top-tier quality that is pretty much unmatched by any of its competition. Just like the original Morelia Neo that came out over 12 years ago now, the boot maintains kangaroo leather featured here through the forefoot and toe box area, and as you'd expect from made in Japan Mizuno products, it is as soft as anything. The kangaroo leather is not just unique for this style of football boot, it also adds to the overall comfort and kind of custom fit that you get with this boot once broken in, as well as the overall touch on the ball. It's the perfect thickness in terms of feeling like you get the padding from the leather while still having a thin, somewhat barefoot feel. The rest of the upper features a combination of knits and textiles that definitely have more of a technical look to them, creating this one-piece enclosure, but it ends up feeling quite normal, matching the pliability of the leather at the front, making for an overall very comfortable fit, but perhaps even more importantly, giving you that structured, locked-in sensation that you expect from a pair of top-end speed boots, especially with the laces tied tight. If you miss the days of the leather F50 Adizero from Adidas, the Morelia Neo 3 Beta is basically a higher quality, more refined version of that exact football boot. From a fit perspective, the combination of kangaroo leather and the textile through the midfoot makes for a more pliable feel to the upper than what you're going to find from most other speed boots, and given the fact that the base shape has some decent width to it, with the laces tied tight and having that nice deep central lacing system, there's plenty of adjustability, meaning that this will work for most foot types and fit quite comfortably. And then as far as sizing goes, given that most people have never tried a pair of Mizunos before, these do run true to size, but maybe just a smidge long. Not enough to where you would need to go down half a size unless you're wearing your boots too big in the first place, but for most people, true to size should work out just fine. As a base, you'll definitely notice that the Neo 3 Beta doesn't feature the same technology that you might find in other top-end speed boot options. However, what it does offer is kind of a more simple, no-nonsense take on a speed boot sole plate, in that it's entirely made out of plastic with some rigidity added through the midfoot and heel. It feels nice and solid underfoot, moves really naturally in terms of flex, and overall just gets the job done. Where it does stand out a little more, although this might be a good or bad thing depending on what your opinion is with its conical FG stud pattern, something that does differentiate this from other speed boot options out there, all opting for more bladed style studs. These are much more aggressive than I think you might expect based on how they look, and also offer more freedom to twist and pivot than what you're gonna find from any other speed boot option. So if you kind of want that hybrid of something a little bit more traditional, but also on the aggressive side, that's exactly what these have on offer. And then when it comes to weight, the Neo 3 Beta is about as light as most of its competition. However, the made in Japan build quality would suggest that this is going to be more durable than all of your alternatives. Speaking of which, the Puma Ultra 1.4, a significantly less expensive football boot when compared to the Neo 3 Beta, and objectively every bit as good, if not better, depending on what you value. They are exceptionally lightweight. You of course don't get leather, instead a super thin barefoot feel, so that's very much a personal preference thing, and the traction is certainly that little bit more aggressive. Again, kind of a different style of football boot, but if you just want objectively the best speed boot for the least amount of money, this is a much better value. Unlike any other brand of football boots, Mizuno actually makes two different variations of their top-end models, an ultra premium and ultra expensive made in Japan variant, and then what I'm holding here in my hands in the Mizuno Morelia Neo 3 Beta Elite, a $200 made in Vietnam variant of effectively the same football boot You still get kangaroo leather, you still get the textile materials and the same sole plate and stud pattern, but of course the build quality and actual materials used aren't to that incredible standard of the made in Japan products. Instead, this is closer to a quality standard that we've come to expect from big brands like Nike and Adidas, so still very, very good. To be honest with you, I definitely think the made in Japan version is nicer overall, but unless you had the two boots side by side, and especially once broken in, it's pretty difficult to tell a major difference between the two. So if you don't necessarily need to have the best of the best in terms of build quality and materials, you can get the same overall experience for a lot less with these. The Adidas X Speed Flow Point 1 is probably the only other speed boot that matches the Neo 3 Beta in terms of the pliability of the upper. Of course, you don't get the option of kangaroo leather through the forefoot and toe box area, meaning that this offers more of a true thin barefoot feel on the ball, which is ultimately very much a personal preference thing. If you don't need that, however, I think what you get for $250 here is something that comes very close in terms of overall comfort and objectively is just as good, if not better, in pretty much every performance area. I love the technology of the Carbitex insert, and in general, it's just an excellent pair of football boots, but again, different from the Neos. And then finally, and hear me out on this one, the Nike Premier 3. Now, of course, this is not a top tier speed boot. In fact, it's not a speed boot at all, but it retails for $110, which means that you can get basically 3 pairs of Nike Premier 3s for 1 pair of made in Japan Neo 3 Betas. The reason why I think this would be a great alternative is for the person that's never tried a pair of leather football boots before and maybe doesn't want to take the plunge in spending $320 on a pair of Mizunos. At $110, you get really good quality kangaroo leather that actually is pretty similar in terms of overall thickness to what you're going to find on the Mizunos. Of course, doesn't necessarily match it in terms of overall quality, but for $110, it is well above average and better than some of the leather I've seen on $200+ football boots. They fit super well, they're really comfortable, and again, they also feature a conical stud pattern in a very similar layout to what you're going to find on the Morelia Neo 3 Beta. So if you're looking for a football boot that has quite a few similarities at basically a third of the price, this would be a great starting point.